Have you ever wondered why some people seem to bounce back stronger from failures while others crumble under the weight of their setbacks? What if I told you that the ancient Stoics discovered the secret to turning failures into stepping stones for success over 2,000 years ago? Before you skip ahead, let me tell you something important. This isn't just another motivational video telling you to never give up. What I'm about to share with you are timeless principles that have guided emperors, philosophers, and some of the most successful people throughout history. These insights completely transformed my perspective on failure, and by the end of this video, they might transform yours too. Picture this: Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world as Roman emperor, writing in his personal journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Think about that for a moment. The very obstacles that we perceive as failures might be the exact things we need to achieve true success. You see, most people have it all wrong when it comes to failure. They see it as something to avoid at all costs, something to be ashamed of, something that diminishes their worth. But the Stoics understood something profound about failure that modern science is only now beginning to validate. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This isn't just some fancy quote to put on your Instagram. It's a fundamental truth about human psychology and success. Let me share a personal story with you. A few years ago, I faced what I thought was the biggest failure of my life. I'll tell you more about that in a moment, but first, let's understand why our relationship with failure is so complicated. You see, we're hardwired to avoid pain and seek pleasure. It's a survival mechanism that served our ancestors well when they were avoiding predators in the wild. But in today's world, this same instinct often holds us back from our greatest potential. When we avoid failure at all costs, we also avoid the very experiences that could lead to our most significant growth. Seneca, another great Stoic philosopher, put it perfectly when he said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Think about that. Just as a diamond needs pressure and friction to form, our character and capabilities need the pressure of challenges and, yes, failures to develop fully. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Stoics weren't just philosophical theorists, they were practical psychologists who understood human nature deeply. They recognized that our fear of failure often causes more suffering than failure itself. Imagine if you could look at every failure not as a dead end, but as valuable data, information that brings you one step closer to success. This isn't just positive thinking. It's a practical approach to life that the most successful people throughout history have employed. When Elon Musk's first 3 SpaceX launches failed, he didn't give up. Instead, he famously said, "If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough." This modern perspective perfectly aligns with what the Stoics taught centuries ago. But I know what you might be thinking. That's easy for successful people to say. They've already made it. Here's the truth, though, and this is crucial. Successful people didn't become resilient because they succeeded. They succeeded because they were resilient first. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to break down exactly how you can develop this Stoic resilience, and more importantly, how you can use it to transform your own relationship with failure. We'll explore practical techniques that you can start applying today, backed by both ancient wisdom and modern research. Remember what Marcus Aurelius said: "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." This simple yet profound insight holds the key to transforming how we view and handle failure. And that transformation begins with understanding a crucial distinction that most people miss entirely. The distinction I'm talking about is between events and judgments. As Epictetus wisely taught, it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about these things. When we fail at something, we often attach heavy meanings to that. Failure. We see it as proof of our inadequacy, as confirmation that we're not good enough, or as a sign that we should give up. Remember that personal story I mentioned earlier? Here it is. 3 years ago, I invested everything I had into a business venture. I'm talking about my savings, countless hours, and even borrowed money from family. And guess what? It failed spectacularly. I lost everything, and worse, I felt like I had let down everyone who believed in me. But here's where the Stoic philosophy became my lifeline. Instead of seeing this failure as the end of my journey, I began to see it as what it truly was, a lesson, an opportunity for growth, and most importantly, a test of character. As Seneca put it, fire tests gold, suffering tests brave men. This shift in perspective didn't happen overnight. It required a complete rewiring of how I thought about failure. And this brings us to the first practical principle I want to share with you, the dichotomy of control. The Stoics emphasized that we should focus only on what's within our control and accept what isn't. When you fail at something, ask yourself, what aspects of this situation can I control? What can I learn? How can I use this experience to grow stronger? Think about it like this. Every time you fail, you're actually gathering invaluable data. Each failure is like a laboratory experiment that shows you what doesn't work. Thomas Edison, who failed thousands of times before successfully inventing the light bulb, embodied this Stoic principle when he said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." But here's where many people get stuck. They understand this intellectually, but they still feel emotional pain when facing failure. The Stoics had an answer for this too. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or pretending failure doesn't hurt. Instead, it means developing the ability to step back and observe your reactions to failure without being consumed by them. It's about maintaining perspective. Consider this: every single person you admire, every success story you've ever heard is built on a foundation of failures. Steve Jobs was famously fired from Apple, the company he co-founded, before returning to lead it to unprecedented success. J.K. Rowling was rejected by 12 different publishers before Harry Potter was accepted. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper for lacking imagination. But here's what sets these people apart. They understood what Epictetus meant when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." They didn't just passively accept these teachings, they lived them. Now let me share with you 3 practical strategies that combine Stoic wisdom with modern psychology to help you embrace failure as a tool for growth. But before I do, I want you to understand something crucial. This isn't about making failure feel good. It's about recognizing failure as necessary, valuable, and ultimately transformative. The first strategy is what I call the pre-mortem exercise, inspired by Seneca's practice of negative visualization. Before undertaking any significant endeavor, take time to imagine all the ways it could fail. This isn't about being pessimistic, it's about being prepared. When you anticipate potential failures, you're less likely to be devastated by them, and more importantly, you're better equipped to handle them when they occur. The second strategy is what I call the obstacle journal, inspired by Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Every time you face a failure or setback, document 3 things: what happened, what you learned, and how you can apply this lesson moving forward. This simple practice transforms failures from emotional burdens into practical stepping stones. You see, Marcus Aurelius didn't just write his meditations for others to read. They were his personal reflections, his way of processing challenges. and extracting wisdom from them. As he wrote, "Our actions may be impeded, but there can be no impeding our intentions or dispositions because we can accommodate and adapt." The third strategy, and perhaps the most powerful, is what I call the Stoic reframe. When facing failure, ask yourself, how would a Stoic philosopher view this situation? This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending everything is fine. Instead, it's about finding the opportunity within the obstacle. Let me give you a real-world example of how this works. I recently mentored a young entrepreneur who lost a major client that represented 60% of his business revenue. Initially, he was devastated. But when we applied the Stoic reframe, he began to see how this failure was forcing him to diversify his client base, something he had been putting off for months. As Epictetus taught, on the occasion of every accident that befalls you, remember to turn to yourself and inquire what power you have for turning it to use. This entrepreneur turned his setback into an opportunity for growth, eventually building a more resilient business with a diverse client portfolio. But here's something crucial that most people miss about embracing failure. It's not just about bouncing back, it's about bouncing forward. Each failure should make you stronger, wiser, and better equipped for future challenges. This is what Nassim Taleb calls being anti-fragile. Not just resilient, but actually benefiting from disorder and setbacks. Think about this. Every time you face a failure and choose to learn from it rather than be defeated by it, you're not just maintaining your position, you're advancing. You're building what the Stoics would call inner citadel, a fortress of mental strength that no external circumstance can breach. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, learned this lesson firsthand when he lost his entire fortune in a shipwreck. Instead of giving up, he used this catastrophic failure as an opportunity to study philosophy, eventually founding one of the most influential philosophical schools in history. As he later taught, man conquers the world by conquering himself. Now, I want to address something that might be troubling you at this point. You might be thinking, this all sounds great in theory, but how do I actually implement these principles when I'm in the midst of failure, when everything feels like it's falling apart? This is where another powerful Stoic practice comes into play, the distinction between appearance and reality. As Marcus Aurelius advised, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. When you're in the midst of failure, it often appears all-consuming, final, and devastating. But this is just an appearance, a temporary perspective clouded by emotion. The reality is that failure is simply feedback, a data point in your journey toward success. Let me share a personal technique I use in these moments. I call it the 5-year question. When facing a failure, I ask myself, will this matter in 5 years? And more importantly, how might this failure serve me in 5 years? This simple practice helps create emotional distance and perspective, allowing you to see the potential long-term benefits hidden within current failures. It's remarkable how often what seems like a catastrophic failure in the moment becomes a crucial turning point in your journey, but only if you have the wisdom to learn from it. Consider this profound insight from Seneca. Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. This isn't just a nice quote. It's a fundamental truth about the nature of success and failure. They're not opposites. They're partners in the dance of progress. Let me share one final story that illustrates this perfectly. Recently, I worked with a client, let's call her Sarah, who had failed her medical board exams twice. She was ready to give up on her dream of becoming a doctor, believing these failures defined her. But when we applied the Stoic principles we've discussed, something remarkable happened. Instead of seeing these failures as endpoints, she began to see them as data points. She analyzed her study patterns, identified gaps in her understanding, and most importantly, developed mental resilience. On her third attempt, she not only passed but scored in the top percentile. Today, she credits those failures as the very reason for her success, saying they taught her more about medicine and herself than any success could have. This brings us to a crucial point that the Stoics understood deeply. The path to success isn't a straight line. As Epictetus said, difficulties are things that show a person what they are. Your failures don't define you, your response to them does. Think about any significant achievement in your life. Chances are it was preceded by multiple failures, setbacks, and moments of doubt. This isn't coincidence, it's causation. Success without failure is like trying to build muscles without resistance. It's impossible. But here's the key insight I want you to take away from this video. Embracing failure isn't about becoming comfortable with losing. It's about understanding that what we call failure is actually the process of success. Every no brings you closer to a yes. Every mistake teaches you what doesn't work. Every setback forces you to become stronger, more creative, and more resilient. Remember what Marcus Aurelius said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Your obstacles, your failures, your setbacks, these are not your enemies. They are your allies in disguise, forcing you to become the person capable of achieving your goals. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you face failure, and you will, because that's part of being human, I want you to pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself these 3 questions inspired by Stoic wisdom. What can I learn from this situation? How can this failure make me stronger? What opportunity is hidden within this obstacle? Write these questions down. Put them somewhere visible. Make them your first response to failure, rather than frustration or despair. And remember this, the most successful people in history aren't those who failed the least, they're those who learned the most from their failures. As Epictetus wisely noted, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Before I end this video, I want to leave you with one final thought. You are not your failures. You are not your successes either. You are the consciousness that observes both, learns from both, and grows through both. This is the essence of Stoic wisdom, the understanding that true success lies not in avoiding failure, but in transcending it. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you found value in these insights, please share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember, as Marcus Aurelius taught us, what stands in the way becomes the way. Until next time, stay strong, stay resilient, and remember, your next failure might just be the setup for your greatest success.